Neal, Dennis, thank you guys so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to have you both on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been first of all, I'm Neal Valera, and I've been a personal trainer since 2007. Just always been passionate about movement, sports, since I was a little kid. So I've done about everything, and then ended up playing golf in college. And then after that, didn't make it as a pro, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to take my passion for athletics and movement and get into personal training.
I love it. What about you, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm Dennis Dunphy. I got into training back in 1999. So grew up playing sports my whole life. Pretty much, you name it. If it's a sport, I probably participated at some level in it. My dad was just a sports junkie, so anything that was competitive, I was into. Focused mainly on traditional training methods as far as when I first got started. Weight loss, aesthetics. Would have liked to have been a bodybuilder at one point, but then just realized I just genetically I'm not cut out for it. I really wasn't willing to do the stuff that you have to do to reach a certain level, and we all know that. So I just wasn't ready to do that. Wasn't willing to do that. And then as I got older, I just realized there's the traditional methods of training may not be everything that we need. Just started exploring and delving out from there, and now I'm at the point that I'm at, and so it's a good spot.
I love it. Well, I'd also like to get both of your backgrounds or your origin stories a little bit. I got a little bit from you there, Dennis, but what got you guys into physical preparation in the first place? What really got you excited about training, working out, and then led you to, make this into a career?
Oh, so, like I said, growing up, did everything, played all the sports. And I started, I was a big fan of Bruce Lee. And I read, he has this book, it's called, he didn't write it, but I think John Little wrote it, and it was The Art of Expressing the Human Body. And I read that and was like, you know what, I want to use this for golf. So I started implementing just some of that stuff there, along with, of course, looking at all the bodybuilding magazines as a teenager and just following that. Mm-hmm. And just from basic bodybuilding training and, being very inexperienced with training in general, you get huge benefits, and it carried over to whatever I did. So then naturally after I finished my golf career, I just wanted to dive deeper, and got, certified in personal training in 2007, and just kind of took off from there.
I love it. Dennis, what about you, man?
Yeah, for me, I really never envisioned myself doing this. A friend of mine, was a fitness manager at a box gym, it's 24-hour fitness. So we were just hanging out the one night, and he said, "Hey, you should come work as a trainer for me." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, he goes, because he was in need of some trainers. He goes, "You work out all the time anyways." He's like, "Why don't you give it a shot as far as making it, kind of a job?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure thing." So I kind of, dipped my toe in the pool, so to speak. I think for most of our industry, I think a lot of trainers, it's just more of a part-time kind of a hobby thing. I think we kind of know that there's just a very small percentage of us where it's an actual career, and this is our life and our passion. Even when I started getting into it, I didn't really, I would have never seen myself, 25 years later or 24 years later, just like, this is what I do. This is my life. This is everything. So, but it's been a great journey. It's been a great experience. For me, it's just the ability to help people improve their quality of life is awesome. So, when you get clients that say, "Hey man, I'm able to do this now. I can do this," and those are the things that really keep me juiced as far as continuing to want to do what I do.
Yeah, it's just funny. Both of you guys kind of mentioned the bodybuilding magazines, and I always think back, like, that's what I grew up on too,
Yeah.
right? In the mid to late 90s, it was muscle and fitness, Iron Man, flex.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what you look at, right? Like, okay, this is how you're supposed to train. And it's been interesting how much we've evolved in the last 25, 30 years when you think about it, and how much more holistic training is now. It's not just, bodybuilding splits and drop sets and trisets and everything to torch our biceps. It's become a lot more holistic in nature, for sure.
It's kind of funny talking about the magazines. It was, you look at their programs, right, of these bodybuilders, and so you mimic them, right, to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had the privilege of working with Scotty Wilson, who was an OG bodybuilder back in the Arnold and Franco days, and just being able to work with him and getting a really in-depth understanding of what bodybuilding really is behind the scenes, and photo shoots and magazines, and he's all like, yeah, those aren't routines. He goes, none of us do that shit. He's like, you open up the magazine, it would say, this is Scotty Wilson's workout routine. He's all like, I don't even come close to that. So literally the author of the magazine would literally create a program and just throw it in there. I was like, oh, interesting.
Wow.
And we'd all follow it.
Yeah.
But he's all like, yeah, that's not my program. He goes, none of that's my program.
Oh my gosh. I just remember how scarred I was when somebody finally broke it to me that, like, the pictures that you would see in those magazines, a lot of times it was like hollowed out plates.
Yes.
So it looks like it's like 45s or 100-pound plates, and it's not. And I was just crushed. I was like, you mean that guy's not really squatting like 700 for reps?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was crushed.
The hollowed out weights and styrofoam. This guy said they use styrofoam plates. They, and I'm like, really? I said the same thing. I'm like, really? Well, yeah, we were just told we'd pump up, and then we were just told to really make it look like we were just holding our breath. And I was like, oh, yeah, it is. It's kind of shattering when you find that out. You're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. I just remember looking at those guys when I was younger, and I was like, oh, dang, I was just crushed. But one thing I would love to hear from you guys, because I love, like, origin stories. I'm into superheroes. I'm kind of a nerd like that. Comic books. What led you guys to creating Stick Mobility? What is the origin story there?
Well, we used to do stick stretching with a doctor, chiropractor over in Santa Cruz, California, Dr. Arthur Fagenholtz. So he was using rattan sticks to do stretching for his patients. So Neal and I, we took a course with him, and we were like, oh, this is mind-blowing stuff, just the way he was applying the stick. And he was doing stretches, but we were like, well, there's a lot more to this than just these stretches that he was doing. For us, mobility is strength, and strength is mobility. They're not exclusive of each other. They have to be together. So we were like, oh, well, using isometrics and using irradiation and all these principles that we use, it was, wow, mobility needs more strength training than it does, quote-unquote, stretching. So that's when we were like, okay, well, we need to develop something new, something that's not traditional or not, being used by most in the fitness industry. So then, and we told Dr. Arthur, hey, this is our concept, this is our ideas. He was all like, great. He's like, yeah, awesome, fantastic, go for it. And so Neal's the one that came up with the Stick Mobility. So he popped the name out, and then we just jumped on the trademarks and all the other stuff that we had to do. And so that's where we started. And I know we started with rattan sticks, and then we graduated to PVC. And then
big fan of PVC over here.
Yeah, and then we got
that's how I started too.
Yeah. So then we evolved to the finished product.
Well, and then originally, I mean, we had no intention of turning this into a product. This was more of like, hey, let's create a program that we can give to our clients and create bigger classes, make some more income. Right. And then we started posting stuff on social media, and people started to like it, and followers grew, and then Coach Chip Warren, former head strength coach of the Bengals, reached out to us one day and was like, hey, we're going to come in we're in the Bay Area. He's like, we're going to play the 49ers. How close are you guys, to us or to the stadium? We're like, oh, we're like 15 minutes away. It's like, oh, I'd love to see what you guys are doing. So we met up with them for a few hours. He's like, I love it. Do you guys have a course where you can teach my coaches? And like, nope. Like, well, if you create one and you can get it accredited, then I'll bring you guys out and we'll do it. And so that happened. It took us a few months to put everything together, and then we went out and trained their staff.
That's awesome. And it's just funny, like how some of those things come about. He has an idea. You haven't maybe thought of that up to that point, or maybe you have. You just haven't had the impetus to get it done. And then you're like, oh, Chip Morton from the Bengals? Well, yeah, no, we can do this. We'll get this course done.
Yeah, because neither of us had any experience systemizing anything, right? As far as what we were doing. So that's where we're okay. We gotta figure this out. Like, okay, how do we create a system around this? And I think one of the things that people get most distracted by is they're more interested in the stick than it is what we do with it. Because we get all the time where people are like, oh, I've used PVC for years. We're like, yeah, okay. Well, this is how we use a stick. And so, and we get comments all the time. And so we're like, no, well, the message is how we use it. It's a product, but we're a movement company that uses this specific product. In the same way that Rock Tape is a movement company that uses tape. It's just our tool.
I like that.
At the heart of it, we're about movement. So, we get people all the time. They're like, well, what if I have my own stuff? Well, use what you have available. We don't care. We're just trying to teach you how to move better and feel better.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so one other question, because I'm always fascinated by this. This was probably like 15 years ago. I had this idea of like a product I wanted to create, and I took it to Chris Poyer from Perform Better, and he's like, here's the thing, right? Like, this is always a way longer process and way more involved than you can ever imagine. So unless you're like hell-bent on doing this, I'd say don't do it. And I was like, okay. So he talked me out of it. But you guys went through this process, right? Like, you took the time to create a product, and not just create it, but then bring it out to market in an incredibly competitive fitness market. So what was that process like for you guys?
We were really lucky. Yeah. So like Dennis said, we started with the rattan sticks, went to PVC, and then we ended up partnering with one of my clients, and he's in the aerospace engineering field, and he's like, I'll go find some stuff to use, and we literally did it in one shot as far as the materials for the stick. Our first prototype, we used tennis grips, right? And which those things, they erode really fast. Tape comes off, so we had to keep manually wrapping these things. It's like, all right, this isn't going to work. Right. So then now, I'm like, with my golf background, I'm like, why don't we use something that just slides on like a golf grip? And that kind of became the final product. But as far as the time it took to get the first stick out, it was just a few months.
Yeah,
right?
I think because it's such a simple tool, the simplicity is really what is, I think, for some people more frustrating, because they're like, why didn't I think of this earlier?
Sure.
It's just and when we look at it, we say the same thing. Why didn't we think of this earlier?
Right.
It's been 8 years since we launched. In reality, we should have launched a decade ago, 15 years ago, right?
Right.
But the process of creating a product can be long and arduous for sure, because you got the patenting process, which in and of itself is very expensive, to find out that it's already been theorized. And so then you got to make adjustments to that, and then you got to play the game with the PTO office as far as, and then you got to pay your attorneys and all this stuff. So you got to keep going back to the table to figure out, okay, what adjustments have to be made. But Chris is right. It can be quite the endeavor. But if you feel that it's going to be something that this is going to be a game changer, I tell people, I go, hey man, it's worth taking the risk, because you'd rather take the risk and fail than not take the risk and watch somebody else succeed with it. So for people out there, for people that are prospective entrepreneurs or are kind of sitting on the fence with that, it's easy to say, and by all means, I understand the trepidation and the fear of diving into the pool, but you gotta jump.
Yeah, I love it, man. Okay, so I want to talk one more question about the stick itself, and then I want to talk training, because I know you guys love to talk training. So I do not have sticks in my facility yet. I've dabbled with them some in other people's, and I know a lot of people that are listening to this probably have not heard of you guys and or haven't heard of stick mobility. So talk to us all like we're total newbies here. Where does stick training or stick mobility fit into an already jam-packed training program?
Well, I mean, we look at it as it can be its own system, but at the same time, it can just be complementary. Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we're using the sticks for added stability. So maybe just getting someone, hey, you know what, they have a really hard time. This client has a hard time getting into a lunge position. Can we use the sticks, create some leverage, create some stability so that now they understand the positioning of where their torso needs to be, their hips need to be. And then we can slowly take that away and go, okay, you look good. Let's load this. As far as your warm-up, because we are doing everything so active, so maybe we're trying to create some active range of motion, you're pushing and pulling into the stick, you could essentially take some of your same movements that you're doing, throw the sticks in your hands, and whether you're pushing them into the ground, pulling apart, squeezing it together with your arms, it just amplifies what you're doing already.
I think one of the things that we see a lot of, especially with the privilege of having been able to work with pro teams, is we see what their warm-up protocols are. And to be honest with you, the players are kind of half-assing it. They're just there's not that engagement, right? So for us, you put a stick in a player's hands and you tell them to push and pull on the stick because they're going through the same exact warm-up patterns and dynamic movement. All of a sudden it becomes a totally different feel. Now you've got an athlete that's engaged in the process versus kind of just going through the motions, which we see a lot of. And on the other side, as far as recovery, people are always talking about, I stretch a lot. But you're like, okay, well, there's a vast difference between passive stretching and active isometric stretching. Those are two vastly different things. And for us, the stick adds energy to that kinetic chain, and it allows you to add strength to that end range position. So that way we start to own those ranges of motion instead of just laying on the floor, quote unquote, stretching like we see most people doing.
Yeah. No, it's just interesting. Like, you do this long enough, and I've worked with a lot of pros in my career. I've been lucky to be in that environment. But one of the downsides to working with pros is, they have to train a lot, right? They've been exposed to a lot, and training can be monotonous because, what we do isn't their primary thing, right? A basketball player wants to be on the court. A soccer player wants to be on the pitch. So I do think there's something to be said. It's not just novelty for novelty's sake, but sometimes when you can do some things different, it just switches them on and you get a little bit better training effect. So agree with that. The other thing, because I'm always thinking about, oh man, if I see a new tool or a new device, like how would I use that? What would I do that for? And again, we'll talk more about training in a minute, but one of the first things I thought about is I'm always trying to push recovery, and I'm always trying to push restoring range. Right? Because a lot of what we do in a weight room inherently takes range away. And Dennis, I know you talked about this, but like strength is mobility, mobility is strength. Well, you can't demonstrate true strength unless you have the mobility to support it. So I was just constantly thinking about, I like it I think I'd use it for this and this. So I love what you guys are doing. But let's talk training, right? Because I know you guys are passionate about this. And like you said, you've got a tool, but you've got an entire movement system that supports the tool as well. So I'd love to hear, Dennis, let's start with you this time. What are some of the big rocks that you guys base your training around? What are some of your key principles for training?
Well, the first one is really leverage and stability. It's what the tool gives you, right? It's the mechanical advantage. And for us, I think that's one of the big things that a lot of people, when it comes to movement, especially loaded movements, physics just isn't in their mindset, right? So it's not the general population. It's teaching people, yeah, we are a slave to gravity. And you got to understand that when you're moving loads, and you got to understand that when you're moving your own body. Like, what is taking place in your relationship to gravity, and why are certain positions more difficult than others? So for us, you being able to apply the tool to teach people what leverage, what stability is one of the very first key things that we like to introduce to people. Because that, for most people, is really a mind-blowing experience for them, because it's just not something they've been taught. I mean, in high school, when it comes to physics class, most of us are kind of sleeping through the course, and we're not really thinking about it, because we're like, how am I ever going to need this? But you're like, no, you need it pretty much every day of your life, right? So those one of the things, and to really get people to understand isometrically what the benefits are when we use isometrics and really intrinsically strengthen ourselves. For me personally, I think those are the two principles that we utilize that I love the most to teach to people, because when people use isometrics, I tell people, I'm like, look, they're not sexy, they're just effective.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't market isometrics. Like, no one's going to get captivated by that. But when you have someone utilize isometrics, you see their face light up, and you're like, but you feel it. You feel the difference. You feel the results. And that's what captivates your client. And they go, okay, I get it. Or this is something I've been missing. Because moving those external loads, they just don't have that ability to connect this to other things throughout their body. So be able to isometrically lock it in and introduce them to new pathways and new connections is like, whoa, this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny. It's definitely not Instagram highlight reel worthy, right?
No.
But you do high quality isometrics, and like you said, intrinsically, you're like, oh no, this is different. Like, I feel this in this targeted area, or I feel muscles. I kind of some of that terminology, but like, you feel muscles turning on that don't normally fire, don't normally turn on. So, no, that's great stuff, man. I love it. Well, one of the things that you mentioned, Dennis, is this idea of leverages, and like you said, most people, unless you took like high level physics or you have a biomechanics background, they're not thinking about levers, right? But one of the areas where I find people recognize and respect levers very, very quickly is in core training, right? So if you're doing something like a dead bug and you're just like tapping your heel to the ground, it's not very hard. But when you extend your arm and your leg, all of a sudden that core is feeling that full length of that lever, and they're like, oh, wow, that's different. Okay, so how are you guys manipulating levers and leverage to get a better training effect?
So basically, with the stick there, whether we're I'm trying to see how I can explain this without you seeing the stick there. Well, we think about the length of the stick, right? Let's just say we're holding it right in the middle. So someone's holding in the middle. Doesn't feel very heavy. Now, if they just lengthen the stick to one side, all of a sudden it's this offset load, which is essentially what we deal with in everyday life.
Yes.
Right? So everything we do, except for most of the lifts we do in the gym, are offset. So just from that little example, they can go, oh, okay, my body feels I have to basically counter-rotate to stay still, or counter-rotate to react to this load. Now, from there, as a coach, we can use the flex of the stick. So let's just say someone's standing in a lunge position, holding the stick out in front. We can flex the stick in a certain direction, just gently, and they can start to feel, oh, okay, so if the load, comes at me this way, this is what I need to do to counterbalance that. And we can do any vector, any plane we want, just by flexing the stick in a different direction. Yeah.
No, that's cool. And I'm just thinking about some of the athletes that I work with. We're talking very long limbs, right? Especially in basketball. You think about how long the arms and legs are. Stability and control is the name of the game. So if you can teach them to stabilize in some of those deep squat, deep lunge type positions and really own that, that's incredibly valuable for them. Because that's protective as well, right? It's not just performance enhancing, it's protective as well.
Yeah, and the stick is great because it allows you to really give them, if you want to train them more through the eccentric phase of a movement, okay, you can allow the stick and give them that added stability to allow them to work through that eccentric motion a little bit longer, which we know they're not going to like to do. because they want to just go fast through all the movements. And then when we slow those same movements down, we see a vastly different response and feedback system. So that's one of the things that we really enjoy with the stick, is just introducing people to, okay, now we can hold this posture, we can hold this position longer. Now we can produce more, we can express strength in this position, and now we can elicit those changes a little bit quicker than we would otherwise be able to achieve, because we may be missing some gaps.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that you mentioned too was this use of isometrics, right? I love using all the different phases, right? Eccentric, isometric. We all love concentric, but I think the eccentrics and the isometrics get lost in the wind sometimes, and especially if I'm doing, say, return to play, isometrics can be huge, because maybe that person can't move in and out of a range pain-free, but they can do isometrics. Also, like you kind of alluded to, when we're thinking about some of our older, like senior clients, right? They want that external stability and control, especially when they're getting started. So I'm just thinking about all the different uses for this and where I could like plug it into my programs, because I love the idea of using eccentrics and isometrics with some of those different populations.
Yeah, I think our friend Dr. Emily Splickle, founder of Naboso Technology, she always uses the phrase foot to core integration. And we know that even everywhere from general population, even to high-level athletes, a lot of times they're missing that ability to understand how to integrate the foot to the core. And so for us, it's the using the sticks is a great way to get them to understand that concept, right? So single leg stability training and adding rotation in and out of that single leg stability training. Without the stick, they may have a really hard time holding position, so they end up basically looking like a dashboard hula girl, where if you use the stick, now we can add that extra point of contact. Now we can get you in and out of the position with more control.
Yep.
And then the brain and the body get tuned in together, and then all of a sudden, progressing down the road, we take the sticks away. Now that movement looks fantastic without the sticks.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I'm just thinking about, too, like, when you think about, say, let's take like a split squat or a lunge type position or a single leg RDL, you see a lot of people, and maybe part of it looks good, but maybe from the foot up, right? They're really on like the outside of their foot. They're losing some of those foot contacts. Right. Like you kind of mentioned, foot to core, core to foot, being able to integrate those two. Now you can really cinch and lock those positions in, kind of rewire things. So like you said, when you take that stick away, now they're better able to control and really own those movements in those positions. That's awesome. Another thing, sorry, that was super awkward transition. I'll have Paul edit that out. My bad. So
all good.
Yeah. Okay. So it's been like 2 decades now, but you guys talked about irradiation. And irradiation is something that I originally heard about from Pavel Tsatsouline. This was like 20 years ago now, right? It was either in like a T Nation article or a USA Powerlifting article. And man, it made a huge difference for me as like a very novice powerlifter. Hey man, turn everything on. If you grip this hard, you get that kind of surge of energy and connection of energy throughout the entire body. So for those who are unfamiliar, could you give like a very basic breakdown of what irradiation is and how you guys are using it in your training programs?
Yeah, I mean, I actually learned irradiation from Pavel too. Took a bunch of his courses.
Yeah.
From 2007.
He's awesome.
And I guess if we were to explain it, it's like you squeeze something really hard, it just drives more energy into your system. So we really recruit more from the nervous system, from the muscles. So if someone was just to squeeze their fist, not holding anything, you feel it in the forearm, or you squeeze really hard, maybe it gets into the bicep, into the shoulder. But now if we grab a tool, and let's just say it's a ball, right? Squeeze the ball, you have something you're doing basically an overcoming isometric, it gives you more energy. So with the stick, let's just say we squeeze the stick, but now we're driving it into the ground at 90% effort. So now we're creating this connection from the hand to the shoulder. Now we're integrating the lat, we're integrating the core. So now they're really feeling all these different things. And if you think about driving 2 sticks into the ground, it's similar to what you would do when you're pulling a bar against your shins deadlifting. So you're creating that connection with the grip, the lat, and just becoming, I guess a good word would be linking everything together better.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that we do that, like Neal just talked about, pushing the sticks down in the ground in the front. And we think about, okay, what tissue lines are we connecting or strengthening, right? So if we push down, then we have the anterior tissue line, right? But then we can take the stick and we can push up, and then we get that full recruitment of the posterior line, right? We can push at an angle. Now you start to get your posterior and anterior slings fired up. So for clients, the terminology is foreign to them. We want them to understand what it feels like, right? So it's really easy to get somebody to take a stick and then push at different vectors, push and pull, and then say, okay, when you're doing this, do you feel this sling? And they go, oh, I feel what you're talking about. Nice. Yes. Now kinesthetically they get it, and then it makes your job easier as a coach, because now every session after that, when you say, hey, we're going to go get that anterior oblique sling from left to right that we did last session, they're like, okay, I get exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what I should feel and how to initiate it.
Yeah.
And so for us, it makes training a little bit easier.
Well, I think you guys know as well as I do, like any teaching tool you can add to the arsenal is generally helpful, right? A lot of the people that we work with, not so much auditory, but visual, and a lot of kinesthetic learners, if they don't feel it, it's going to be really hard, right? So if you have another tool that you can add to your toolbox that's going to allow somebody to feel what you need them to feel, and then now we're going to take this into, once you've got it with the stick, you're locked in, now we're going to take this to a chop pattern or a lift pattern, a lunge, some sort of dynamic throw. Like once you've kind of got that locked in, now it just really sets the stage for the learning of those bigger, broader, more dynamic activities.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's cool. Okay. Ultimately, I think everyone that's listening to this would like to help their clients and athletes move better, feel better, create more body awareness. What are some of your guys' keys to success in that regard?
Well, for me, as far as getting clients to understand, for number one of my big things is increasing their body awareness. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of my first objectives, is to get people to understand what their body's doing, or what it's experiencing, or what it's not experiencing in many cases, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about, okay, you have the ability to do this, but you don't have the ability to do something else. So let's work on that deficiency, right? That's one of my first number one goals, because most likely that inability to do something is what's creating the issue. So let's focus on figuring out what it is what you're missing, and get somebody to understand better about themselves, because I'm not always going to be around, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like, I want a client who ultimately, after they're done training with me, is generally much more knowledgeable and smarter than most of the trainers they're going to come across.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's really one of my goals, is because when they go on vacation, or when I'm out traveling, teaching or whatever, I need my clients to be able to put a workout together on their own, and then they can go, okay, these are my chronic issues, or these are issues that I am deficient in. So this is the stuff I'm going to work on, because Dennis showed me this is the stuff that I need to work on. And now after that, I'm going to follow up with some stuff that I really enjoy, I really like, I'm good at, right? So that way, when clients have that confidence to step into a weight room or a gym and go, I know exactly what I know I should be doing.
Yeah, I love that. Neal, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think just kind of building on that confidence piece. I think that's literally the biggest thing we can give to our clients, is give them as much confidence in their body, how they can control their body in space, so that body awareness, whether using the stick or not, can we expose them to different ranges of motion that they may not get in their daily life, that maybe they had when they were as a kid? Can we slowly build and expand that? And then with the range of motions that they do have, do they control it well? Is it quality movement? and just make them more physically capable that way.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, we're trying to create a more resilient human being, or as resilient as they need to be, I should say. Not everybody has to have the same skill set or the same level of resiliency, but a 70-year-old grandmother versus a 20-year-old collegiate athlete, vastly different things, right? Resiliency and skill levels are two vastly different things, but we want to be able to endow each person the level that they need.
Yeah. Do you guys know Luka Hasavar?
Yeah. I don't know him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Luka and I always talk about being harder to kill. Like, that's one of our goals in life is like, zombie apocalypse hits or, something crazy. We want to be harder to kill. But in all seriousness, like, two things that you guys mentioned there. One, I love the idea. I always think about attacking my rate limiters with myself, with my athletes. Exactly what you guys described, right? What are your deficiencies? What are your rate limiters? Things that are holding you back. And then I love this idea, and I preach this to all of my athletes, all of the clients I've ever trained. Ideally, they get to a point where, sure, they want me to be around, right? They want me to help coach them. Maybe they need me for some accountability. But ultimately, if I train somebody long enough, they get to a point where they're fixing themselves over the course of the session, right? I'm coaching and cueing less because they know how it's supposed to look and feel. And they know if it's not looking and feeling the way it's supposed to, and they adjust it on their own. So I love that idea of creating like more self-sufficient clients and athletes through our movement training. I think that's a brilliant way to put that.
Yeah, because ultimately, client retention is great for business, right? We all know that. But at some point, you got to cut ties, or you should be able to, or you should have the ability to cut ties, right?
Yes.
So that way
that's a great way to put it.
You know what? I've loved working with you for X amount of years, but I think I'm good to go on my own, and fantastic. And if you ever need me, you know how to get a hold of me, right?
Right.
But I shouldn't have to expect you to be dependent on me all the time to be able to do everything. And I think for us as coaches, that shows our ability to be able to take somebody to that level where they're confident enough to go, you know what? I think I'm good. I think I can handle this on my own. Great. Fantastic.
I love it. Okay, guys, big question time. If you could alter the space-time continuum, start from scratch with stick mobility, what would you change?
It's a good question.
That's why it's the big question, man.
Well, besides starting it sooner, gosh, that's I think maybe getting the marketing the strength aspect out there sooner, more, because I think early on, with some of the stuff we posted, it just looked like, these guys are just doing yoga flows and this stuff, and that's fine and everything. But I think a missing piece was that we are actually teaching you how to get stronger too. Yeah.
No, I like that, and I'm always thinking about, as a small business owner, small gym owner, I can't buy every gadget, toy that I want. So one of the filter I put everything through is, okay, if I'm going to invest in this, how many things can I do with it? Mm-hmm. Right? It's the reason you buy a squat rack versus a leg press, at least initially, because you can do a ton of stuff in a squat rack. Yeah. You can do one or two things in a leg press. And so I think that was one of the things that I was really impressed as I obviously do research before I do these shows and I kind of deep dive on you guys. It was really cool to see that, again, there is an implement that you use, but we're talking about an entire movement system. And so, there might be one thing that draws you into it initially, right? Like, I need this. I want to improve my mobility. Or, I want to do this to improve my stability and get better isometric control. But then beyond that, there's so many other tools and ways that you can use the product. I think that's what the allure is. And I think you guys have done a really good job of showing that. Because, like you said, it's very easy to just, stick mobility. Okay, you're going to be a yogi and stretch, and that's all you're going to get out of the tool. You guys have a lot more to offer than that.
So, it's one of the things that, I talk to Neal about all the time is our biggest market is actually in Southeast Asia, where they love movement. They have a different, generally is a society, they view fitness a little bit different. Of course, aesthetics is still a big thing, but here in
Sure.
the West, aesthetics is pretty much everything when we train. And for me, it's great. It's fantastic. Everybody should be, that's a great goal to have. But longevity should be something that more people are thinking about, right? What I do at 30,
Yes.
can I do it at 60, right? And so for me, it's like,
Yeah.
at 51, I still have the ability to go play ice hockey 2-3 times a week, right? And so I want to be able to
Awesome.
still do that when I'm 71. And so my focus on training is aimed at being able to continue to do that. And I think that's one of the it's hard to tell a 20-year-older that the quality of movement is really important to you, right? I mean, I know myself at 20, if somebody would have told me that, I would have been like, whatever, dude. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. So, it's in a perfect world, I would love that to be the mindset in pretty much everybody, but that's just not the world we live in. But we're trying to convert people, just one person at a time, to understand that, your longevity should be one of the main things that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And this is something that Joel Jameson is a good friend of mine. He talks a lot about conditioning, and he's kind of morphed into the longevity space as well. We talk about this all the time because he and I are on the same boat. It's like, hey, man, like, how long can I do the things that I enjoy doing, right? I'm 45 now. People joke around and they're like, well, what do you train for? Because I've been known as a lot of things, right? The mobility guy, like a power lifter, very mediocre at best. But, I've done a lot of things. But at the end of the day, it's like right now I train to be able to do what I do right now for as long as possible. I still coach every day. So I like to be able to demonstrate for my athletes. I work with high-level basketball players, so never going to be at the level of output that they can. But being able to go on the gym floor and feel confident that I can move and do what I want is very important to me. So I think that's fantastic, and I love your guys' mission. Okay, so last but not least, we've got our lightning round. So 4 fairly short questions, but your guys' answers can be as long or short as you like. Okay, number 1, I'm going to start you with the hardest one first. What was the biggest failure or struggle you guys have had in your business, and how did you overcome it?
I'd say it's still going on.
What is it?
For me, it's education.
Okay.
Because people,
as in like educating trainers and coaches?
It's because people look at it as just a product.
Yeah.
I mean, that's our biggest obstacle is people go, and we've literally had trainers walk up to us and call us frauds to our faces.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's insane. We were at IDA the one year.
Oh yeah.
And this lady straight up came up to us and she goes, "You should be ashamed of yourself." She's like, "I can't believe you're here selling a stick." And I was like, "Well, let me show you some stuff." And she literally just walked away. And I was like, it's more than a product.
Right.
So for us, it's I think, and it's still a struggle, is to get people to understand there's education behind this. It's not just a product. We want to show you how to do it. And so that's why, I inferred a little earlier when people say, well, I can just use what I have at home. Yes, you can. Go ahead. We don't care. If you buy our sticks, great, fantastic. But if you just have a wooden dowel or a broom handle at home, use that too. We're just going to tell you how to use it so that way you can achieve the same things that we're trying to get after.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And look, at the end of the day, you're free to do whatever you want, right? That's the beauty of living where we do. We can generally choose and do what we like. But yeah, I think, like you guys said, it's not just the stick, right? It's not just that. It's the education and the understanding. And, it's frustrating because I think you guys have mentioned this as well. It's just like there's so many people in our industry that are very part-time about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that I've tried to cultivate in this show. Hey, look, if you're part-time but you want to be full-time, great. This is the show for you. If you're a career trainer, coach, this is the show for you. I'm not going to sell you quick fixes and all that. It's like, hey, look, part of what we do is educate for a lifetime. Because you can't just learn some things and get a degree or get a cert and then do those things for the next 30 years.
Yep.
We're constantly educating and refining and looking at things a little bit different so that we can give our clients and athletes the best chance for success. So, man, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think the education piece of it is so critical, and I'm glad to hear that you guys are on board with that, because it's something I'm obviously very passionate about. Okay, number 2. I Instagram stalked both of you, so I've got some specific questions here. Dennis, it says you're a culinary enthusiast.
Oh, yes.
So I want to know, what's the best thing you can make in the kitchen?
Oh, Neal will tell you. What's my best thing I make?
His mac and cheese is out of this world.
Oh,
it's like
yes,
it's ridiculous, man. I remember the first time he's like, "Oh, come to the Super Bowl party. I'm going to make my mac and cheese." I'm like, "It's mac and cheese," whatever.
Yeah.
Go over there. I'm like looking at this thing, and my paper plate's like just it's soaked. I'm like, "Oh man, I don't even know if I want to take a bite here. I think I'm going to die of a heart attack." I took a bite and I was blown away. I was like, "Oh my god, what is in here?"
Life
it's like
changing,
$100 worth of ingredients in this little tin.
It's probably the most expensive mac and cheese you'll ever have. I've had multiple people tell me that I need to sell this. What's interesting is I grew up in the restaurant industry, so I worked. And ultimately, my goal when I was younger was to own my own restaurant. So I've been cooking for myself since I was 11, 12 years of age. And I've had the privilege of working with some pretty solid chefs. So you just live and learn. You learn from them. You watch. You listen to what they're saying and how they, what the process is, and so I think for being a home chef, I don't think I do too bad. So I hold my own. But yeah, my mac and cheese it's pretty good. So
it's pretty legit. All right.
When I go to places, they always say, "Oh, the world's best mac and cheese." My wife is always like, "I don't think they know," and I'm
challenge
like,
accepted.
"No." I'm just all like, but I do like to sample some every once in a while just to get, and I'm like, "Yeah, no."
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Well, if I'm ever out there, I'm going to take you up on that.
Definitely.
Even though you didn't offer. I'm going to come over just because I want to try this.
Here, let me know, yeah.
I love it. Neal, talk to me. How's the golf game these days, dude? Are you hitting them straight or what?
Oh, man, I played, let's see here. I'm going to play this weekend, and I'll be my 3rd round this year. So I went from playing, like 300 rounds a year for a good portion of my life, right? To playing about 5 rounds a year. My daughter's 5, my son is 3. We've got just been super busy, and leaving for 6 hours. Actually, it turns into 8 hours, right? 9 hours.
Oh yeah.
That's not an option all the time. No, I can still.
It generally doesn't win you any points on the home front.
No,
it doesn't win you any points on the. Hey, babe, I'm going to be gone for like 9 hours.
Yeah, every weekend, I could still go out there and I could shoot par or I could shoot 85. So
wow,
we'll see what happens this weekend.
I'd take any day where I could shoot par. Okay, I lied. I got one more. Which one of you is the Marvel fan? I saw Marvel on one of your guys' Instagrams. Or is it both of you?
This guy's really hardcore with it, yeah.
I just like you. I mean, I started reading comics at 6, 7 years of age. So
really,
yeah. I mean, same story like a lot of other people have. I had a huge collection of comics, and when I went into the military, when I came back, my mother felt the need to get rid of them all. There were many issues that I was all like, I used to have that. And I used, it's like when I'm on auction sites and I'm looking at these comics, I'm like, I own that one. I used to have that one. I used to have that one, and now they're in a landfill, probably all destroyed by now. Someone, 30 years later.
Oh my gosh, that's a burn, man.
Yeah, I love Marvel.
Yeah, I was late.
Yeah, I love DC. I remember when Image Comics first came out, when it was Todd McFarlane, and they started coming out, and you started getting all these newer characters in the early '90s. I had the privilege of meeting Stan Lee a couple times at a couple signings, so that was fantastic.
That's awesome.
Two of my prized possessions are the first appearance of Loki in Thor. He signed for me.
Okay.
And then I collect statues. So if you ever...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I collect statues. I have a Dr. Doom from Sideshow, which is a beautiful piece. And he actually signed that for me. And it was pretty impressive because...
Really?
When I took it to the show, this thing weighs like 25 pounds. And so...
Right. You're just hauling it all over.
Yeah, so I had it, and I was waiting in line, and I had people coming up and asking to take photos of it, And so I remember when I put it in front of Stan, his eyes were like, what is this? He was just absolutely blown away by it. So it's autographed at the bottom, and so I know there were 1,500 pieces made, but I'm pretty sure I have the only one that's actually autographed by him.
Wow, that's amazing, man. Well, guys, one more question. What's next for Neal Valera and Dennis Dunphy? What are you guys working on right now? What are you excited about? Anything?
So we're going to have a few other products coming out that are complementary to the system. Things that are simple that people can use at home or take to the gym.
Sure.
Just using the same movement principles, and so that's what's next there.
I think, like Neal said, it's the simplicity and the versatility. I think those are two of the things that we're after when we look at products, right?
Yep.
And cost effectiveness, right? So, if someone had spent $3,000 on a treadmill, think about what other things they could have bought with that $3,000 that would have been
absolutely
much more beneficial, right?
Yeah.
So it's showing people, look, these are the three, take these into consideration: price point, versatility, and simplicity, right? The more complicated it is, the less you're probably going to use it, right?
Yep.
So if it's easier, you're probably more apt to get into it. So I think those are the things that we're after. I know we do have some products, like Neal said, that are complementary, but we're always on the front for looking out for new products that people may have that may need a little bit of a partnership to get up off the ground. So I think that's something we're going to delve into as far as a company.
That's awesome. Well, guys, this has been amazing. I've loved learning about both of you, the stick mobility origin story, right? I love that. So thank you guys so much for coming on here today. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great work that you're doing?
So you can find us on at Stick Mobility on Instagram. We're posting daily on there. We have a YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to that. It's just Stick Mobility, and gosh, we probably have 500 or 600 videos on there.
There's a lot of videos.
There's a lot of
videos. It can be organized. It's in the process of getting organized a little bit better.
Yeah.
So that'll be helpful for people. And then go to our website, if you're interested in purchasing sticks or finding more about we have a level 1 and level 2 certification, along with an intro course for just someone that doesn't really care about using it to teach, but more so personal use. And then we have an entry level program for trainers that want to know how to use it, but may not want to get into a whole certification too.
Very cool. Very cool. I'll make sure I put all those links in the show notes. Yeah. The YouTube page is robust. I mean, robust.
Yeah.
Between all the videos and all the different, like coaching and like stretching, like all the different sections you guys had broken down. It looked very organized to me. So, well, fellas, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really great having you both on.
Well, thank you,
Mike. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.